Monster Hunter Stories began with a promise. A vision of a spin-off series that combined the phenomenal creature and world design of the Monster Hunter series with the creature collection mechanics most associated with Pokemon, and the dense, fully realized narratives endemic to all great JRPGs. The first game made an admirable attempt at this vision, and the second game further polished it. But it is Monster Hunter Stories 3, Twisted Reflection, that finally makes the dream of a fully fleshed out Monster Hunter RPG a reality. I poured over 100 hours into my review copy of the game, and I loved nearly every second of it. So let's talk about Stories 3, and about what a triumph this game is. The core fantasy at the heart of Monster Hunter Stories is that of riding a dragon across vast fields. And to my absolute delight, monster riding feels better than ever before. In previous titles, monsters all moved more or less the same, with some feeling maybe a tad smoother than others. But in Stories 3, you really get to feel the difference in mobility and physique between different monsters. A Lagiacrus is kinda clumsy on land, while runners like Yangaruga feel like riding an all-terrain motorbike. Monster abilities have also been made a lot more intuitive. No more button prompts or menus. If you want to jump, you hit jump. It all leads to a very seamless and fun traversal system that really gets to shine thanks to the excellent level and map designs. The vast fields that you get to explore are full of varied terrains and secrets to uncover, and I never got tired of just running around Canalta to see what else may be hidden between its rocky spires. If you've played the demo, you might have noticed that monsters can no longer fly infinitely, needing air currents and perches to glide over long distances. Bad news. You never unlock any other means of flight. It always works as it does in the demo. I do think there is something going on behind the scenes, as I could swear that higher level monsters could stay in the air for longer, but that's just speculation. Good news though. This is, frankly, a positive change, because it makes flying an actual tool for traversal rather than a cheat code. Because flight is not infinite, the game asks you to observe the maps carefully and plan your routes, something that I found really satisfying. I honestly didn't even think anyone would mind this change until the demo came out and people started talking about it. That's how seamlessly the new flight mechanic nestles itself into the game's exploration and traversal. Said exploration is also worth it, as there are plenty of things to find. Items, unique crafting recipes for new equipment, the little lost Poogies, and, of course, monster dens that allow you to gather eggs to hatch into your monstrous companions. Dens have been redesigned to now just be a single room, instead of the randomly generated mini-dungeons that they were in previous games. This is an example of intelligent streamlining in my opinion, as the trek through the old dens was fairly boring and repetitive without adding much to the game experience. Just like in previous games, you hatch the retrieved eggs into monsters that you can then raise and use, with 2 supporting systems that allow you to further customize your team. The Rite of Channeling returns from previous games, allowing you to move genes between monsters to give them skills and abilities they would not usually have. Gene channeling has also enjoyed some clever changes, such as the monster donating the gene no longer being consumed, or genes being able to be rearranged at any time without limit. While I did kind of miss the ability to stack genes to make them more powerful, which has been removed this time around, I found myself way more eager to experiment with builds in Stories 3 thanks to these changes. And this is amplified by the new habitat restoration feature, the star of Stories 3. Basically, every map in the game is separated into multiple ecosystems, each with a set of endemic species. By releasing monsters you have raised, you can strengthen the populations of endemic species or add new species to an ecosystem. By doing this, you can influence the kind of eggs that you can find. Monsters with large and healthy populations will produce offspring with powerful S-rank genes, for example. Additionally, every ecosystem is imbued with a type of elemental energy, and once a monster population is large enough, you'll begin finding dual element monsters imbued with that energy in addition to their usual element. Dual element monsters allow you to, for example, hatch an orange Lagiacrus that can use both lightning and fire attacks effectively. Because it is dual element rather than element replacement, you can either use this to give monsters new powers, or simply use it as a color skin without also giving the monster unusual skills. That's what I did with my orange Lagiacrus, Citrus. It doesn't end there either. Monsters can also be born with egg skills, which are unique abilities derived from the specific ecosystem they were born in. Habitat restoration can even allow you to unlock entirely new monster species through mutations. For example, by increasing the Astalos population in an ecosystem inhabited by other powerful electric monsters, you can cause Bolt Reaver Astalos to start appearing. Because different mutations have different, sometimes interlocking requirements, this quickly becomes a fun puzzle in of itself, as you try to create the correct environments to allow for certain species to emerge. My one criticism here is that mutations feel a little underused. There are plenty of subspecies in the game that just wander the world by default, and I think the game should have doubled down and locked all subspecies monsters behind the mutation mechanic. But, as it stands, this is an extremely fun system that, in synergy with everything else I've mentioned, truly gives you a ton of control and incentive to experiment with your monster team. And experiment you should, because you need to be ready for this game's combat encounters. I would never have called Stories 1 or 2 particularly difficult outside of their respective endgame challenges, but Stories 3 regularly kicked my ass, and kicked it good. The combat still works as it always has. Turn-based battles revolving around choosing the correct attack type to overpower your opponent in a head-on clash. What is different this time around is that the game is balanced quite differently. In Stories 3, you get fully healed at the end of every battle, which means that damage never persists. Which in turn means that the enemy AI does not play nice out of consideration for how you'll do in the next battle. Not only is the level curve a lot harsher this time, meaning that enemies will always be significantly higher level than you unless you grind levels like crazy, but enemy attack patterns are also really aggressive, often resorting to wide-range attacks that target your entire party. During my playthrough, it was common for 1 or 2 mistakes to cost me the entire battle, which I know sounds rough, but honestly it was pretty awesome. It forced me to get creative and try to get the most out of what I had available to me. Of course, keep in mind that I played this in isolation, and I'm sure that after launch, the community will find all sorts of broken strategies to make me feel like a noob. But as far as my experience with the difficulty goes, I was locked in and challenged in a satisfying way throughout the entire experience. Shout out to the final stretch of the game in particular, where I had to build specific teams for each specific mini-boss I got stuck on. The combat also benefits from Stories 3's willingness to throw unusual or roundabout challenges your way. While most fights are straightforward enough, every once in a while a boss fight will demand that you solve a small combat puzzle. These special battles happen both during the story and through the game's new monster types. Feral monsters are monsters with crystallized body parts that counterattack automatically if hit. Here, the game asks you to deal with unusual elemental abilities and attack patterns. Then there are exotic monsters, which are monsters that exhibit abnormal ecological behaviors. For example, a Velocidrome that has maxed out its speed stat and can literally not be hit by attacks as a result. And then, the coolest new monster and battle type, the invasive monsters. These are subspecies that have evolved to conquer foreign ecosystems and serve as the game's super bosses. During your first encounter with them, you merely have to repel them by using their unique ecology against them. Invasive battles were definitely a highlight for me, and I was surprised at how much thought had gone into this new monster type. I won't spoil any of the puzzle solutions naturally, but let me say that invasive young Garuga, which you may have seen in the demo, is by far the least cool invasive monster, with all others being a lot more interesting. The combat also inherits all of the good parts of the previous games. I was continually impressed by how well the game took gameplay ideas from the main series and translated them into a turn-based environment. Being able to predict monster behavior purely because I had fought that monster in other Monster Hunter games felt incredible, and I adore how transferable my game knowledge ended up being. Companion AI also seems to have been made a lot better, with your party members generally making fairly smart moves in normal combat. That being said, more precarious encounters did cause them more trouble, and it can be frustrating watching Eleanor waste her turn when you are trying to take down a beast 20 levels higher than you. But that was pretty rare. For the most part, the various systems of Stories 3's combat synergize really well, creating the best battle gameplay in the series yet. And all of this, exploration, monster raising, combat, happens within the context of the game's excellent story. Having now seen it through to the end, I can say that it is far and away the best Monster Hunter story ever told so far. While it doesn't fully follow up on all of its ideas, and while I do wish that the character side stories tied a bit more directly into the main story, those are really minor gripes in the face of a truly engaging narrative that has some real texture to it. The political conflict between Azuria and Vermeil and the mystery of the encroachment evolve into a tale of the inherent responsibility we have to each other, the world we call home, and the past that we'd rather bury. And I was happy to see that the game, mostly, avoided easy answers. This culminates in a truly awe-inspiring finale that I will, of course, not spoil. Suffice to say that it is incredible, and I loved every second of it. Key to this is also the cast. The Rangers are incredibly likable and take an active role in the story at all times. I kept thinking that they kinda feel like the Straw Hats from One Piece, just a gang of goofballs that are both trying hard to achieve a goal and that deeply care about each other. I even ended up really liking Rudy, who is such an upgrade over Naviru. Instead of just being the voice of a mute protagonist, Rudy is an actual character with his own set of beliefs and flaws, and I found it endearing to learn more about him. As Stories 3 is set hundreds of years after the previous games, there are only a few vague references to the other Stories games, but they are very tastefully done. One in particular is probably one of the most emotional scenes in the entire game. But that aside, Stories 3 stands alone, so you don't need to have played the previous games to enjoy it. The story also does something really interesting that I love to see in these big JRPGs. At various points, the plot will tell you that you have some free time. For example, because you have to wait for a ship to arrive so that it can ferry you to the next story part. In these instances, you can either immediately advance the story by talking to Rudy, or you can go ham on all the side activities and quests. This elegantly avoids any dissonance between plot urgency and gameplay, and I really appreciated being able to do side quests for hours on end without feeling like the illusion of the story was broken. Now, I would like to briefly talk about the amount of content in Stories 3. This is a pre-launch review, so I'll keep it vague and spoiler-free. I was mostly happy with the game's size and density, but I do think it could have benefited from having maybe one more story chapter and associated region. The monster roster is quite solid and larger than in previous games, but there too I was a bit saddened by some of the surprising omissions. Moreover, the game seems to have been designed with the idea that you do a ton of side content before you finish it, rather than designing side content to be mostly sought out after the credits. At the time I am writing this, nothing has been confirmed regarding title updates or other content additions, but I really hope that Stories 3 gets some. This is an incredibly strong foundation, and I think that just a dollop of additional content could really bring it all together. As it stands though, it is still a dense and enjoyable package. Overall, I loved my time with Monster Hunter Stories 3 Twisted Reflection. The game presents a fully realized vision of a Monster Hunter RPG, an experience that merges an enticing narrative, challenging turn-based battles, rewarding exploration, varied team building, and a beautifully fleshed out ecology system into an engaging and fun fantasy journey. The fact that my only real issue with the game was that I wanted more of it should really speak for itself. People like numbers, so I give Monster Hunter Stories 3 Twisted Reflection a 9 out of 10. If you are at all into Monster Hunter and enjoy turn-based combat, I highly recommend you check it out when it releases on March 13th. If you are unsure, the aforementioned demo is a great way to see if you like it. It's free, and your progress carries over into the main game, so there really are no downside to giving it a shot. Thank you everyone so much for watching, as always. I would like to give a special shout out to everyone who supports the channel via Patreon or YouTube channel memberships. A very special thank you to A. Jackson, Admiral Frost, Alistair in Wonderland, Artur Centeno, August, Austin, Autumns, Black Ace 202, B, Bruggy, Chocolate Coat, Claire Miboon, Darkest, Destro, Dragonlord, Dissy, Echo but Evil, Ethan Toombs, Feopuz, Faye/Sleepy Tiki, Fjiden, Glitch NPC, Good Hunter, Harpier, Hellbug Hunter, Hutsan, I'm Just Happy to Be Here, Inepts, Iron Camel, It's Robin Now, Jacob Coleman, Joey Tribby 58, Jonathan Ginsberg, Magenta, Carl the Crab, Kelly Barnett, Kogath, Lifa Dienst, Logan Bilodeau, Lufish, M1Have12, Macaroni Leviathan, Makamawi, Makot02, Matt Hat 124, Meta Defiance, Mr. Pyramid, Molly Mockery, My Name Gone, Nico Soleil, Nils Schlatter, Noah Schantz, Oakwood Tree, Paige Gandalf Soda, Person 212, Precum King, Punanim, Quali, Rambling Robin, Raspberry, Regal Eagle, Resident Neko Arc, Wronger 97, Rose, Ryan Hook, Skiba, Shebo, Silly Wizard 97, Siragon, Sir Newt Newt, Soruka, Tacti Wolf, The Iciest Man Alive, The Dollarfish, Thick, Tsuki Midnight Boshi, Unk with Good Puss, Uthduna is an Octopus, Varaxis, Vulgar Beast, Wandering Soul, Wolf of Time, Zaffy, Zeno Garcia, Zai Bandit, Zion H.V. Augenson, and Kuroneko. Take care, everyone, and I will see you next time.